Dr. Keith Villa joins me from Ceria Brewing to discuss Blue Moon, non-alcoholic beer, and infused beers. This is Beersmith Podcast number 303. This is Beersmith Podcast number 303, and it's mid-May 2024. Dr. Keith Villa joins me this week from Ceria Brewing to discuss Blue Moon, non-alcoholic beer, and infused beers. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched an all-new experience, Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, and their Spirits and Distilling podcast. Again, the new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And Beersmith Web, the online version of Beersmith brewing software. Beersmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try Beersmith for the web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click on those like and subscribe buttons on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking on those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back Dr. Keith Villa, co-founder of Ceria Brewing Company. Keith retired from a 32-year career at Miller Coors, where he was a brewmaster for Blue Moon. He then launched Ceria, which focuses on full-bodied, alcohol-free craft beer. He also wrote the book, Brewing with Cannabis. Keith, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Brad. Thanks for having me on again. It was fun last time, and I hope we have more fun this time.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, I think we had you on, about 20 months ago, and you were just getting started with Ceria. What have you been up to these last 18 months?
So we've been trying to grow the brand, and your listeners may know or may have seen in their favorite liquor stores or grocery stores that the number of non-alcoholic beers has gone up almost, well, I was going to say exponentially, but it's increased quite a bit. A lot of new entries into the marketplace, and so we're there too. And yeah, we've been trying to grow our brand and also distinguish ourselves from the competition.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I want to talk some more about Ceria in just a minute, but back in episode number 265, we did talk a little bit about how hard you fought to get the Blue Moon brand established, which I think is now, last time you said something like $1 billion brand. Is that right?
Yeah. If depending on the numbers you look at, it's $1 billion brand, and some numbers show it as a little bit under 2 million barrels a year.
Wow.
So it is a big brand, and you could argue it's the biggest craft or pseudo craft brand in the United States.
Wow. How did you manage to get a craft style beer started at one of the largest U.S. breweries?
It was a lot of hard work. It really was, because in those days, 1995, number one, the public was beer drinking public really wasn't accustomed to drinking craft brews, because in those days they referred to them as microbrews or microbrewed beers, and most people thought in their mind of a microbrew beer being more or less a amber ale or some type of English or UK product, such as a stout or a pale ale. Certainly today's view of craft beer is far different than it was back in 1995.
Yep. And I understand you had some challenges as well internally, right?
Right. So aside from the external challenges, internally it was really tough, because the folks at Miller Coors, back then it would have been a Coors Brewing Company in 1995, they were very concerned at first, because they thought that the recipe I had created for Belgian White, Blue Moon Belgian White, which included coriander, orange peel, wheat, oats, and of course barley malt and hops, but those non-standard ingredients put fear into the management team at Coors, because they thought there would be cross-contamination, and that Coors Light and Coors and Killian's, all the different beers they made at the time, would get contaminated with the flavor of spices. So I wasn't allowed to brew there. I had to brew at a contract brewery in upstate New York, which is called FX Matt Brewing Company. And I'm sure some of your listeners have heard of FX Matt up in Utica, New York, and the reputation they have up there of brewing really good, solid beers.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. But you managed to fight through all that, and Blue Moon, of course, became one of the largest craft beers. It is interesting that most of the big breweries now have entered the craft style market, which they weren't doing 20, 30 years ago. So they're effectively trying to compete against a lot of the craft styles. Um, what do you think? What do you think drives that? Why are they? Has craft beer really eaten that much market share out of the big brewers?
Um, Not really. In fact, here in 2023, it's come full circle where some of the big brewers are actually divesting their craft holdings because you know in the mid 2000 teens, I guess it is, uh, there was a lot of hope and hype that the craft industry would become huge, and even the Brewers Association was pushing. I think it was something called 20 by 20 or something like that. So what they were trying to accomplish was getting 20% of the beer market by 2020, and of course that never happened. And but in the early teens, a lot of people thought it would happen because of the growth of the industry, the craft brew industry,
Yeah,
and it never happened, never materialized. And so, um, but during that heyday, a lot of big brewers were interested in the craft scene because they also thought it would be big. For example, Constellation purchased Ballast Point, and in those days, if you remember, the headlines showed that they paid about $1 billion for that brand and
yeah,
their brewery. Um, Anheuser-Busch started purchasing small brewers from Goose. I think Goose Island was the first one, and they went on a kind of a spree where they bought numerous breweries, and of course, Coors slash Miller Coors slash Molson Coors bought several breweries, uh, such as which ones were there? Oh gosh, off the top, Hop Valley Brewing, uh, as well as several others, and uh, and yeah, a lot of them thought these craft brewers would become big nationwide brands. You know, somewhat like Blue Moon. Blue Moon is a nationwide craft or pseudo craft, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
and most consumers in
I'd
their
say
minds,
craft style. Let's call it maybe.
yeah, yeah, we'll stick to craft style. Although in the typical consumer's mind, they view it as craft because it's always uh, situated next to uh, true craft brews. So we'll call it craft style. But yeah, the brewers back then, the major brewers thought that the craft scene would really get big, and
Hmm.
so they purchased a lot of the small brewers. Not very many, but some of the more popular ones and some of the bigger ones. And then along the way, uh, other craft breweries were purchased by foreign large brewers. So New Belgium, Bell's, Anchor. Um, who else? Lagunitas purchased. Uh, no, Lagunitas was purchased by Heineken. Stone was purchased by Sapporo.
Hmm.
So just a lot of changes in these last, I would say, 5 years, 6 years, with some of the more popular and big craft brewers getting purchased. Um, but like I said, what it's turning out to be here in 2023 is that uh, this hoped for growth of the industry didn't happen. It never materialized. And so some of the brewers, the large brewers, started divesting away from craft brewing or shutting down breweries and just keeping the brand name and brewing them in house to cut the cost of goods. Um, uh, so yeah, so it's been a pretty big change. I think one of the bigger things we saw in the news was Anheuser-Busch InBev divested of, I think, 8 of their craft breweries, selling them to Tilray, which is Canadian company, best known for being in the cannabis industry up there. They bought all these breweries from Anheuser-Busch InBev, and now they are considered, I believe, the number 5 largest craft brewer in the United States, and that's Tilray. Um, and in the news, you'll read that Tilray is really trying to get a means to distribution throughout the United States market, and they definitely have that now with their real solid play of craft breweries, um, and they're also gearing up for when cannabis becomes legal here in the United States. So,
Hmm.
so really, they've played their cards really well, um, and some of the other brewers are doing different things. Like Sapporo purchased Stone, and they're now converting the breweries. I believe there's 2 of them uh, to making Sapporo beers. They're different lager beers, as well as Stone products. And yeah, so you're seeing just a lot of adjustments that big brewers have made since purchasing these craft breweries,
Hmm.
and also we're seeing a definite slowdown in the craft brewing industry at this year's craft brewers convention. Uh, uh, the people from the Brewers Association were really talking about this being a slowdown, and not not really fake news at all. This is a true slowdown, and it's a very serious one because we're starting to see some well-known names go out of business, and even a lot of popular craft breweries or brew pubs, in small towns or have gone under and gotten out of business. So it really is a kind of a tough time where craft brewers are going to have to hunker down and try to innovate and figure out a way to improve sales. And that's kind of where uh, non-alcoholic beers have come in, because NA beers are now growing at the rate of about 20 to 30% per year, and a lot of craft breweries have entered that market because they see it as one of the better ways to diversify and start making some income.
Well, I haven't seen the numbers for this year, but as you mentioned, craft beer is still less than 20% of the market. And I think last year we hit something like 9,500 breweries, which is just a incredible number. So we have this odd thing going on where, more and more breweries are competing for basically the same market share. And then, as you mentioned, I think this year we've finally started to turn the corner, and we're actually seeing a slowdown in the overall craft beer market. So, um, yeah, what do you think about the changes in direction of the market? Is it good? Are people just going to buy more traditional beer, or are they going to push into other styles like you mentioned, the NA beer?
Well, besides NA, the other thing that people are consumers, in particular, LDAs up to about 29. In the beer industry, we refer to um, the young drinkers who first start drinking as LDAs, which stands for legal drinking age. So those would be 21-year-olds up to about 29. They're really starting to purchase these. Oh, they're for lack of a better word, fruity type of beers,
Hmm.
and not necessarily beers, but beverages, more like cocktails and mixed drinks that are pre-made in cans. So they're referred to as RTDs, ready to drinks, and a lot of them are made with spirits instead of malt based. So High Noon is one of the better sellers right now, made by Gallo, and it's doing really well in the marketplace.
Hmm.
And there are other brands too. For example, Boston beer. Uh, well, Boston beer had a went through a really nice period where Truly seltzer, hard seltzer, uh, went on a tear and just sold a bunch, but then it slowed down when the hard seltzer craze kind of slowed down, and so Truly started to be made with vodka instead of malt base, and they've tried a bunch to reverse that slide, but what they're doing now is really focusing a lot on twisted tea, because twisted tea is doing quite well.
Hmm.
Uh, and then, of course, New Belgium uh, is doing really well with their Voodoo series, and they're also getting into that hard tea business, coming out with a Voodoo inspired type of hard tea that's about 8% or more alcohol. So so brewers are really starting to get innovative and coming out with these new beverages that are not very beer like, especially when you look at the offerings from like Gallo, the High Noon products. Even Molson Coors is getting into it with Happy Thursday, which is this new line of kind of fruity beverages, beers that are come in at about 4% ABV, 4.5. So they're low alcohol or somewhat low or mainstream alcohol, but with a very fruit juice type of character to them.
Almost
That's
almost seems like a resurgence of the wine coolers from the 80s, just in terms
that's
of the fruity alcoholic drinks. They didn't really have that's about all they were, really.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. A really good analogy, if you will, because I think it goes in cycles where you go through cycles where people love these fruity type of drinks, sweet, fruity, uh, and then after that has played its course, they go back to the familiar standard beer products, which are fully fermented and bitter. Uh, and yeah, you're right. In the 1980s, we did see a lot of these fruity beverages pop up, California Cooler and all these other things.
Wine coolers were wildly popular for a while there. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
and when you look at it, alcohol by itself has a harsh flavor, and the higher the alcohol level in a product, the more harsh it is. So to get people to drink it, you do add flavors, or suppliers will add flavors and sweeteners to make the harsh taste of alcohol more palatable. So you're certainly seeing that now, and you saw that in the 80s. But today's products, I think, are a little more refined.
Yeah.
They're less alcohol. They're very well made, um, and they're made with spirits. A lot of these newer ones, and people just love them. And the spirits come into play for a number of reasons. One, a lot of people think if something is made with vodka or tequila or whiskey, that it's a spirit based beverage, and they think it tastes better or it's going to have more of a buzz, or there's all these different factors that come into play. Um, and I guess the other thing is it is a little bit cleaner of a taste compared to a malt based beverage, because when you ferment a malt base and try to make these fruity beverages, you do end up with some maltiness, which
Yeah.
if you test
Kind of
them,
muddies it.
yeah, and if you test them with a consumer on a blind basis, a malt-based beverage versus a vodka-based beverage, you'll see that consumers will usually pick that vodka-based one because it's cleaner. It just has a more well, I don't want to say crisp, just cleaner, and doesn't have that malt character that some people love. But if you test them again, as I said, most consumers will pick the vodka-based one because of that clean taste.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The homebrewing market has also been on a multi-year slump, going back almost to, I think, around 2014, 2015 timeframe. And a lot of clubs took a huge hit during COVID, in the wake of COVID. I know I've been to a number of them locally, speaking at the clubs, and their membership's way down, to be honest. And then this year, of course, HomebrewCon was canceled, and you were the keynote speaker just a couple of years ago at the Homebrew Convention. Yet homebrewing is really still still an engine for innovation. Where do you see homebrewing going?
I think there will always be home brewing here in the States because I think people are fascinated by it. Those who take it up as a hobby really love it. As far as the AHA, the American Homebrewers Association, and it being the leader of this movement, this organization, I think AHA has to. Personally, my view is they have to become relevant again, because when you think about it, and I started out as a home brewer, as did many other craft brewmasters.
Sure.
And if you think about it, today's person who wants to get into home brewing, all the information they need is at their fingertips. They jump on their laptop. They can find recipes. They can find how-to articles. Um, and
YouTube.
exactly. And so it's just a treasure chest of knowledge, that the internet, for anyone who wants to get into home brewing. And in fact, you can even order all your brewing supplies if you want online. So really, uh, I've talked to some young people who are home brewers, and I ask them why they aren't members of AHA, and a lot of them say, why do I need AHA? Because they can get all these things online, information,
Sure.
supplies, everything, and why should they have to pay for that through AHA? What's in it for them? And and so I think that's where AHA has to do a much better job of being relevant, especially to the young homebrewers of today, who are the future of home brewing. Um, when I was the keynote speaker a couple years ago, I remember looking into the audience, and I saw, uh, I hate to say it, but a sea of gray hair. I saw a lot of older
Yeah.
people out there. Nothing against older people. I'm old. I'm retired,
Yeah.
but but to look out and see, um, a lot of older people enjoying home brewing, uh, that's fantastic. But it would have been nice to see, half and half of the crowd really experienced and knowledgeable and older, and the other half younger and eager to take it to the next level, and become tomorrow's expert home brewers. Although that's not to say that there are some expert young home brewers, there really are, but it would have been nice to see more young brewer participation. And as I said, uh, I've asked some younger homebrewers, why they don't join, and that's the answer I get is, why should I pay to join when I could get everything on my laptop? And I think there's probably a little bit of I don't want to say us versus them, just this perception that the AHA is mainly older people, and uh, but I think uh, Julia Hers, who's the executive director of the AHA, she's fantastic. She's a great home brewer, and I think she needs to hire a really good market research firm to figure out, what is this root cause of the the drop in attendance in these hard times that the AHA has fallen on, to the point where they had to uh, not have a convention this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and once they find out, the reason or reasons, Julia, I'm positive, will uh, address them, and make AHA relevant again, to the point where people will say, you know what, I've got to sign up for AHA because they're the source of all the information or whatever it is, and uh, when you get membership up, uh, you'll have another convention, and it'll grow again. And I think there's always going to be homebrewers, and I think AHA, once it becomes relevant again, especially to younger homebrewers, I think that's when you'll see things really, really go to the next level. You'll see even more AHA or homebrewer innovation. You'll see just a lot of cool things happening.
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly hope we see the market turn around at some point. It's like I said, it's been declining for a better part of 10 years now. And yeah, the numbers, if you look at them, just go to Google Trends, for example, uh, probably half as much interest as there was 10 years ago. So, so we keep hoping things will turn around and get a little bit better. Now, one topic we discussed last time quite a bit about how to make low alcohol beer. But we didn't get around to talking about how to make low alcohol or non-alcohol beer at home. You mentioned you were using a proprietary method at Ceria, but how do people at home make low alcohol beer?
So the best ways to do it at home are to really use specialty yeasts. Um, and also, you could use heat to boil off alcohol, because alcohol boils off at about 173 degrees Fahrenheit, if my memory serves me right.
Right around there,
And
yeah.
and so, but the trick is to not make if you're going to use heat, and specialty yeasts, which are becoming more readily available for the home brewer. Um, the trick really is to start out at a lower gravity than you would with a full alcoholic beer. Um, for example, if you're making an IPA, typically you're going to start out at a balling of maybe I don't know 16 to 17 degrees Plato, and I'm not sure what that is in specific gravity, since I think a lot of your listeners use
That's
specific gravity.
probably 1050 something, probably
Yeah, a rough rule of thumb is to take Plato and
by 4.
multiply by 4. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so but yeah, so instead of that, the best thing to do for a home brewer is to use the Plato at the end of their beer when it's all done, and then set their brew up that way. So so instead of starting with a 17-degree Plato original gravity,
Sure.
you start out with most IPAs will end up at somewhere around, let's say, 3.5 or 4 degrees Plato, something like that. So there'll be higher ones, lower ones, but 3.5. So you'll focus on that 3.5 degrees Plato number, which is 3 times 4 is 12. So it'd be 12 uh, homebrew units, or 1.0012. Um, so you'd focus on that 3.5 degrees Plato, set your recipe up with that,
Uh-huh.
because there's going to be very little alcohol for it. And then that's what uh, boil off, or if you're using one of the yeasts that don't make they don't make alcohol from maltose or maltotriose. These are yeasts that only can ferment glucose. So in that case, if you set up your homebrew with a lower starting gravity, um, and then kind of do the math, where you figure out that roughly 70% of the sugars are going to be maltose, maltotriose, all those, uh,
Sure.
and about I don't know, 20% or so, 25% are
Yeah,
going to
so
be.
you're only going to get an attenuation of maybe 20 or 30% instead of 70% you might get with a typical yeast, right?
Yes, and so if you set it up that way, set your recipe up that way, use one of these specialty yeasts that are coming on the scene at your local home shop, and ferment it. You'll see that that yeast will stop fermenting when the glucose is done. Um, there will still be some maltose and maltotriose, so a little bit of sweetness there, but you'll be able to make a non-alcoholic beer. And then if you want, you can even take that and heat it to 170 or 173, and boil off that alcohol. And as you boil off the alcohol, you really can smell it. It has a sweet uh, smell to it. Um, and there won't be too much to boil off at that point. So you just hold it there probably for, I don't know, 30 minutes, maybe a little more, and get that alcohol down until you can't smell it anymore. Typically, when you can't smell any more alcohol coming off that brew, it's going to be about zero point 0.5, give or take. So it's, unless you have that the scientific machinery at home to actually measure alcohol, a lot of this is going to be kind of doing some calculations and using your senses,
Yeah.
uh, which is really what brewers, even big brewers, did before the advent of all these high tech instruments. You always used your nose, your tongue, your eyes to see what you're doing, and to figure out if the brew was a good quality brew, whether it contained alcohol or not, and whether it was fit for sale. So yeah, same thing with home brewers today. Is they can use their senses and determine if that alcohol is gone and if the flavor is still palatable to give to their friends.
Yeah. Well, I've tried both actually at various times. People have handed me both styles of beer. The heating one is interesting. It does unfortunately change the character of the beer quite a bit when you heat it up. But recently I've had some of the newer yeasts that these low alcohol yeasts, and they do a remarkably good job of creating something that really does taste like beer, at least for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because talking to some of the yeast suppliers, that they've isolated some of these newer yeasts from sources such as rotting fruit, rotting vegetables, those type of things. So these yeast aren't traditional brewer's yeast, so they do have just a very slight uh, flavor difference compared to a brewer's yeast.
Hmm.
But it's close enough that when you make a non-alcoholic beer, it surprisingly can taste pretty good. Um, and yeah, with the boiling step, for those people that may want to take it down by heat, um, you're right. There are flavor changes, but the I the best styles to make to minimize flavor changes would be stouts and porters and just the heavier, darker beers, because those I've tasted those type of brews that have been made by heating. Again, starting at a low gravity, because some people do make the mistake of starting at a full gravity and then starting to boil that down. And by the time you boil a 6% alcohol beer down, you're really cooking the beer rather than um, keeping it at 173 until that alcohol is gone and just de-alcoholizing. So
Exactly. Yeah.
so you really have to start at that low boiling to minimize that cooked effect.
Well, while we're on the topic of non-alcoholic beer, I want to move back over to Ceria, which of course is your non-alcoholic brand. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the new things are happening at Ceria since I think we talked like 20 months ago now?
Yeah, so what we've been doing now is really the newest thing is we're actually focusing on the fact that we're the only alcohol-free craft brand that we know of in the United States. So as your listeners may or may not know, I'm going to guess they don't know.
Yeah.
The TTB, which is the organization that governs brewers and winemakers and distillers here in the United States, the TTB stands for the Tax and Trade Bureau, or more officially, the United States Alcohol Tax and Trade Bureau. We call it the TTB. It's the modern equivalent of what was called the ATF in the old days, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Yeah.
So the TTB regulates beer and wine, and especially the labels of these products. And so TTB has rules for low alcohol products in the beer world. So if a brewer is going to make uh, anything with low alcohol, they have to abide by these labeling standards if they want to sell beer in the U.S. So non-alcoholic, uh, as determined by the TTB, says that a product has to have less than 0.5% ABV, down to anything that's measurable. So in essence, it turns out to be 0.01% ABV all the way up to 0.49. So it's less than 0.5. So that's how much alcohol is allowed in a non-alcoholic brew. And the TTB has a second category for these type of low alcohol beers. It's called AF. So AF stands for alcohol free. And what the TTB will do is if you want to call your product alcohol free, you send a sample, and the TTB has a gas chromatograph, which is a high-tech method of measuring alcohol. And if they can detect any alcohol from 0.01 up to anything, they make you call it and label it as a non-alcoholic beer. But if they cannot detect any alcohol at all, 0.00, they allow you to call it alcohol free. And so that's a difference, a huge difference in products in today's market is the TTB allows you to call your product alcohol free or non-alcoholic, one or the other. It turns out that virtually all of the craft NAs out there are non-alcoholic. We have yet here at Ceria, we've yet to see any other alcohol-free craft beers. So we are saying that ours is the only alcohol-free craft beer in the U.S. And as a as an example, I'll just show you real quick.
Sure.
Here's our label,
Mhm.
and you can see at the top it says zero. Can't even see here. There
Zero
it is.
point zero zero. Yeah.
0.00, and down below it's right there. You can see it says alcohol free.
There you go.
And the TTB, they only allow you to say alcohol free and 000 if it truly is alcohol free. So, and again, we had to send samples for them to measure. And I'll reiterate that in today's market, we've done a lot of searching and cannot find any other alcohol-free craft beers. The majors have a couple out there. So Bud Zero is alcohol-free. Heineken Zero is alcohol-free. But in total, there's a handful of brands out there that are alcohol-free, and we're the only craft. And so So to answer your question, the last 20 months, we've really been playing that up and trying to educate consumers about the difference. Because in the NA world, what we're finding is more and more uh, drinkers that want to uh, limit themselves, or some want to give up drinking, but most don't want to do that. Most just want to incorporate something with low alcohol, just to kind of temper their input um, and stay healthy. I think that's the name of the game, is staying healthy. So these drinkers search for NA products, and for most of them, they're fine with less than zero point 0.5. But if you question them, a lot of them are saying that they felt like they were fooled, because when they saw non-alcoholic, in their mind they were thinking that
No
that meant,
alcohol.
yeah, no alcohol, alcohol free. And so what we do is we educate them and say, well, you're right, there is a product out there that is called alcohol free, and the government regulates that, and those are true 0.00 products. And then we talk about the fact that we're the only craft that falls in that line of AF. Um, and then what they usually do is they say, some of them will give the reasons why they are searching out AFs. And some people uh, just want to avoid alcohol for a short time, and some want to avoid it altogether. Some are on medication and can't have alcohol. Some follow religions that don't allow alcohol. Um, so and Some women who are pregnant are told by their doctors not to have alcohol, not even NA products, because it has alcohol. And so those are the type of people that search us out, and it really is kind of fun to show them a graphic that we ended up making, showing that a typical 6 pack of standard American beer, Bud, Miller, Coors, it comes in at 5% ABV, uh, has the equivalent of 6 1-ounce shots of 80 proof whiskey. So again,
Sure.
one 6 pack of regular beer has the alcohol equivalent of 6 shots of 80 proof whiskey. One 6 pack of NA beer can have the equivalent of up to about a shot of 80 proof whiskey in the 6 pack. One 6 pack of alcohol free beer has, of course, zero alcohol. So that's what we've been kind of educating consumers about, is do they want a true zero, or do they want about a shot glass of 80 proof whiskey in a 6 pack of NA, or do they want 6 shots of 80 proof whiskey equivalent in a 6 pack of beer? And these are again uh, drinkers who are searching for different products, uh, which can be low alcohol, non-alcohol, alcohol free. Most are doing it for their health, just to lead a more healthy lifestyle. And most are younger, from legal drinking age up to maybe 30 years old. They're just following a healthier lifestyle, which is great for them, because they'll live longer, be healthier, and it's just a good thing for society, because there'll be less sick people in hospitals and such.
So you mentioned you're distributing these basically nationwide. Which styles are you offering? What styles of beer do you offer in Ceria?
So we offer a Belgian white, which is similar to Blue Moon, because that's what made me famous. I created Blue Moon, and so I created a Belgian white brewed with coriander, orange peel, and blood orange peel, and of course made with barley malt, wheat malt, and oats. And it comes in at 0.000. It's alcohol free. And then our second flavor is an IPA. So it's kind of a West Coast style of IPA. Comes in at 40 IBUs, so it's on that low end. Uh, we've analyzed quite a few different IPAs, and there certainly are some major ones that people would think are higher, but they're actually around 40 to 45 IBUs. And so us being at 40, we're right in that low end, but a true IPA. Um, and we did that because IPAs really are the leading seller by style in the craft industry.
Certainly, yeah.
Everybody has an IPA, whether it's West Coast, hazy, or
I
whatever.
believe there's still over 50% of the market, is what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the reason we did an IPA, and the other reason why we did a Belgian white, and we're working on some other variations now and styles.
And the names of those two, I wanted to mention those because people might see them on the shelf.
Oh yeah, so the Belgian white is of course Brainwave, Brainwave Belgian white, Belgian style ale, and our IPA is called Indie Wave, Indie Wave Belgian West Coast IPA. And but the crazy part is that there are certain styles that the TTB allows you to call out on the label, and other styles you cannot call out on the label. So, for example, IPA, we do say somewhere on here it does say IPA because that's one that the TTB, for some strange reason, they allow that. And this one here, the Belgian white, it does say Belgian style white, but it doesn't say Belgian style white ale. So, uh, yeah, it could be Belgian style white chocolate or white whatever, but it's they don't allow you to say ale. They don't allow you to say beer, uh, stout, porter, uh, pale ale, um, any of those type of terms. The TTB will not allow on
So you
it.
can't,
NA.
so you can't call, do you call it beer? Are you allowed to call it beer, I guess?
Um, it's called alcohol-free
Malt
malt
beverage?
beverage. So
Malted
yes,
beverage, yeah. Okay.
malt beverage, and
It's just
so
like Ken Schramm, who makes, in my opinion, makes some of the finest meads in the world, isn't allowed to call them mead, from what I recall, because they contain fruit in them.
oh gosh, I know the government. Well, in the old
I think
days,
it's called a fruit wine or something.
yeah, the government has those little strange things that you have to work around because in the gosh, when I became a brewer back in the 80s, uh, one of the things that brewers were not allowed to sell was uh, high alcohol beers, and it was almost nationwide. There were just a few states that allowed beers with high alcohol, but most states made you label a beer above 5% ABV as an ale. So if you made any, even if it was a Bock or any
It
strong
was a
lager,
lager, yeah. Yeah.
you had to call it ale because if it was above 0.5%, or sorry,
Yeah.
5%, uh, states just had this weird law. And there were quite a few states that if it was above 10%, you couldn't sell it. Other states above 15% couldn't sell it. It was just illegal to sell.
Yeah,
But
we could
nowadays,
spend hours talking about the intricacies of the TTB, but probably not a good use of our time. I did want to mention you originally started the non-alcoholic beer so you could get into the cannabis market because you can't mix cannabis and alcohol, but you can put infuse cannabis into a non-alcoholic beer. So I want to ask about that market and how that's been going for you at Ceria.
so we started out that way, infusing our alcohol-free beers with cannabis, and that's one of the reasons we made alcohol-free beer at the beginning was
Right,
because
exactly, yeah.
we patterned ourselves after the market here of the future. We thought would be like Canada, where Canada beverages have to be 0.00. They have to be alcohol-free beverages if you're going to put THC in them. And
Hmm.
that's why you see so many of these seltzer products, non-beer seltzers that are infused with THC, because I think a lot of brewers are afraid of the consequences of mixing alcohol and beer and potentially losing their
License,
TT,
yeah.
their brewer's permit. Yeah. So, so, so we've been in the market. We were in the market for 2 years in Colorado and in California, making uh, our alcohol-free beers infused with THC,
Hmm.
and we had to abide by all the cannabis laws. And let's see, our Belgian white had 5 milligrams of THC to kind of simulate that relaxed feeling of a 5% ABV beer.
Sure.
Then our IPA had 10 milligrams of THC plus 10 of CBD, so that you could get a buzz like an IPA, but the CBD would mellow it out, so it's not, so you don't get that nervousness with
Hmm.
buzz.
Hmm.
And so we did that for a couple of years, and we found that at the beginning margins were very good, but with the market, the margins gradually shrank down to the point of being really thin and hard to do business.
Wow.
Because
Why is that? Why did they why did the margins go away?
so there are a couple of reasons. One is uh, the IRS has a rule that if you're selling anything or even doing things that are federally illegal, you cannot write off anything on your taxes except cost of goods sold. So
Wow.
in our case, you can't. The only thing you could do is write off the cost of the cannabis. Everything else you can't, and so your effective tax rate ends up being around 65 or 70
Wow.
percent. And so at the beginning of a phase of legal recreational markets, you can mark your prices up, and a lot of people will buy your products and try them out and everything. But over time, what happens, we've seen this in virtually all the cannabis markets here in the States, is that over time, consumers will look and they'll say, you know what, I just did the math in my head, and the beverage right there sells for $8 for one can, and it only has 10 milligrams of THC. But if I pay, $12, I could get a pack of gummies that's a total of 100 milligrams,
Yeah.
or I could get that thing over there. I could buy some bud, and get even more THC, more bang
Or
for the
just buy
buck.
your alcohol and THC separately, huh?
Yeah. So that's what happens over time, and we've seen it, and that is in the legal marijuana markets. But now, what's happened in the last year is that Minnesota uh, mistakenly legalized THC beverages made from hemp. So it's hemp-derived THC,
Hmm.
and uh, and what happened is a lot of extractors uh, said that there was a loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized hemp, and the loophole somehow allowed these extractors to extract out all the cannabinoids, THC, CBD, all those, and then put them in a water soluble form and then put them in beverages and alter the concentration. So in hemp, the natural THC content is less than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. But when you extract it, got a really concentrated amount of all these things, including THC. So you can get a pretty strong psychoactive beverage made from these extracts. And
Hmm.
the legislators in Minnesota mistakenly legalized this, and the brewers took note, and several of them jumped on it right away and got products out to the market. Sparkling water, flavored and infused with low levels of THC,
Sure.
2%, 5%. I think there are some 10% ones, um, and you can sell them because it's not regulated, so you can sell them in convenience stores, gas stations. Even Total Wine has picked up on it too, and they're selling them up there. So and then it spread to Michigan, and Illinois is also doing it. But at the same time, some states like Texas and California and Florida are starting to put regulations together to treat hemp derived cannabinoids in a similar way to marijuana, so that you've got to
Sure.
buy these in a dispensary versus at your gas station or liquor store. And um, and we think that's going to be the rule of law pretty soon here, because
Yeah, I'll
um,
probably close that loophole, huh?
yeah, especially since national news outlets like USA Today have reported on a rising number of high schoolers coming to class high because they bought a, THC beverage at 7-Eleven and they gulped it down, and all of a sudden, now here they are acting like they just smoked a little bit of a joint. And of course, when you have kids getting high, of course, a lot of people get upset and say we need regulations. And so
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to drive hemp-derived products to be treated just like marijuana and sold in dispensaries. And so your original question was why were margins high, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
ex-
Yeah.
that's one reason. But the other um, reason is that consumers who are looking for beverages generally don't go to liquor stores. They'll go to convenience stores and uh, those stores like that,
Supermarket. Yeah.
supermarket. And that's why I think these beverages really took off in Minnesota and Michigan and Illinois, is because people could buy them at their convenience uh, versus going to a dispensary. Because when you look at people who go to a dispensary, a lot of them end up doing the math and saying, you know what, the best buy here is that bud, that flower, that's you know just pennies per THC,
Yeah.
milligram THC, versus the beverage that is really expensive,
Yeah.
and so it just
So
really
are
limits.
you, I have to ask, are you out of that market now then, or no?
Well, what we decided to do was get out, but just sit on the sidelines until federal legalization. And so we anticipate uh, that happening towards the end of this year, because as you and your listeners may or may not know, the President Biden pushed the Health and Human Services to study the scheduling of marijuana and potentially to reschedule it, because right now marijuana is scheduled as a Schedule 1 drug, the same as crack cocaine,
Yeah.
LSD, these type of drugs that are really don't have any medical value, but they get people high or just are psychotic in nature. And so he pushed them. The HHS came back and said, you know what, our study says that marijuana should be moved from Schedule 1, which is the most dangerous and addictive, to Schedule 3, which is where steroids are, and cough syrup with codeine. Those type of things are in Schedule 3,
Hmm.
and so that recommendation was given to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, which oversees scheduling, and it's in their hands now. And they what they've done is they've issued uh, a ruling now to say, okay, we agree with Schedule 3. Now we'll put it out there for public comments for everybody to get back and tell us their reasons. Maybe that they don't want it in Schedule 3, keep it in Schedule 1, or if there's other reasons, maybe people might give to completely unschedule it or deschedule.
Sure.
So it's right now it's in the public realm. People are giving their comments, and sometime in late July, I believe, is when the that window will close, and the DEA will then regroup, reconvene, and
And they have to
uh,
go through the formal rule publishing series, right? They have a
yes,
process they have to go through. Well, Keith, we are running a little bit low on time, but I wanted to give you a chance to plug your book, Brewing with Cannabis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure, yeah. So Brewing with Cannabis, I wrote that a couple years ago, and uh, at the behest of the Brewers Association, or Brewers Publications.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they said that there was a need for some knowledge about cannabis and brewing and putting them together. So I did it from a couple of different angles. One being a home brewer, number two being a professional brewer, and number three just being somebody interested in learning about cannabis. So the book has its different chapters, and like the beginning is kind of written for anybody who wants to know the history of cannabis and why it was made illegal and such. And then there's a couple chapters on growing it yourself, kind of the biology of the plant and how to grow it. And then there's a chapter on how to use it in beverages, and then a chapter on the the effects of the cannabinoids, what they do. And I threw in a bunch of scientific references too, so people can see that it's not just this stuff is not pulled out of a hat. There has
Sure.
been some science on how these things affect the human body, or animals in test studies, so that you can know whether these things are truly active on the biological body. And then I include the last chapter. I think I have some homebrew recipes where I've incorporated the cannabis and how to get it into the beer, how to make the beer non-alcoholic. Um, but like all things, um, there's advancements all the time. So in that book, I didn't put anything about the new yeasts that have arisen in the last
Sure.
year,
Sure.
year and a half. Uh, so there's just so much new things going on. But for anybody that just wants to kind of get the basis of cannabis and kind of get a start in beverages, yeah, they could pick up the book, read it, and figure out things. And
Hey, was that through the Brewers Association? I assume you can find it online, probably at
oh yeah,
Amazon, maybe.
yeah, it's on Amazon. You can get it through uh, the Brewers Publications, which is a division of the Brewers Association, and they have a whole lot of really cool books on brewing. In addition to mine, you've got books on all these different beer styles and
Hmm.
everything that a home brewer can pick up if they want to really make their lager world class. There's really good brewing books, or in my case, if you want to get into cannabis, you've got all the uh, knowledge that you need in that book that I wrote. So it's called Brewing with Cannabis, And again, available on Amazon or through Brewers Publications.
Awesome, Keith. Well, I just want to get your closing thoughts now. Appreciate you coming on. What are your thoughts after a lifetime of large and small brewing?
To me, it's still fun because I think your listeners really show that it's this world of brewing is something it's fascinating to people. It's fun because you can start with benign ingredients like barley and hops and water and a little bit of yeast and turn those things into a really delicious beverage that you can share with friends. So for me, it's all about the social aspects, the scientific aspects, and just the fun of it. And I've enjoyed it. My career is started off in 1982 being a home brewer, 1986 being a professional brewer, and I've done this for a long, long time. I have a PhD in brewing from the University of Brussels
Sure.
in Belgium, and for me, it's just been a lifetime of fun. And I hope your listeners, see that it's a something that can be a hobby, a lifelong hobby, something that you can have a career at, and it's just another aspect of life that I think your listeners can really, I think, look at and say, you know what, that could be me. Or they may say, I don't want to do that for a living, but I love doing it as a hobby. And but the thing that brings us all together is the world of beer and fermentation. To me, that's really critical because in today's day and age, so many things are going on. At the end of the day or the end of the week, it's just going to be a great time to sit down with your friends and enjoy a home brew and forget about life for a little.
I agree. Yeah, things are challenging. Well, thanks again for coming on, Keith. Really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Brad. Yeah, thanks for everything you do for the brewing community. Please keep this up.
Thank you. Very kind. Thank you. Today, my guest is Dr. Keith Villa, co-founder of Ceria Brewing and retired brewmaster for Blue Moon. Thanks again, Keith.
Thanks, Brad.
A big thank you to Keith Villa for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched the all-new experience, Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, their Spirits and Distilling podcast, and much more. Again, that new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And also Beersmith Web, the online version of Beersmith Brewing software. Beersmith for the Web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try Beersmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.